Barmer Trust is an independent charitable trust that works across Gloucestershire to benefit disabled people and people with mental health conditions. Our vision is that Gloucestershire will be a better place when disabled people and people with mental health conditions are equal, empowered and their rights upheld. As a trust, we regard ourselves as an agent for social change within the county by working alongside organisations and running learning programmes to influence change. One of the ways we are doing this is with our Access to Nature learning programme. In part one of this Access to Nature podcast, we spoke to Helen and Max from the National Trust about the Access to Nature learning programme. In today's episode, we continue the conversation and explore the barriers that exist and learn more about the National Trust journey in improving access and accessibility on their sites in Gloucestershire. Welcome to the Access to Nature podcast. My name's Josh. I work at Barmer Trust and I'm here today with Max and Helen from the National Trust. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think it'd be really helpful to talk about some of the barriers that people might be facing. So as you've been doing some listening and learning, like what kinds of things are you hearing about as barriers presenting to disabled people particularly?
There's some kind of classic bread and butter stuff, just like the paths are steep, or there's the transport isn't there, or there's nowhere to use facilities that are suitable, or there are no facilities at all. Yeah. So some of that stuff, it seems fairly basic, but it's actually massive for people, and it's a real big hurdle. Yeah. And then some stuff is more nuanced and more, as I said, that there's little tiny things that you can change, but some of it is big infrastructure stuff, and then some of it is around maybe confidence and welcome. So as I said, it's that pre-visit stuff. It's letting people know that we're here. It's letting people know what they can do on a day out, and actually explaining the options, and that
they're welcome.
And that they're welcome, and that we have provisions we can put in place, or that there is maybe not every route is doable, but this one we think maybe will be, or it's got this level of challenge. So some of it is around that how we're presenting ourselves, and some of it is around actually the what's there on the ground and what.
There were a couple of things that sort of, they're big problems in the countryside. The countryside is spread out. It's vast. It's not huge communities of people all going to the same place. There's a lot of beautiful countryside across the country, and a lot of it is here in the Cotswolds. And one of the things that we found in the Access to Nature room is that people are saying transport. So Helen's mentioned it already. Accessible transport, financially accessible, frequent transport. So often, countryside bus services that run once on a Tuesday, they don't help anybody with much more than nipping to the shop. But this isn't just about physical accessibility, it's also people who are elderly and or they're unable to drive for whatever reason. It's people who maybe, a public bus service is something that's quite intimidating for them. And we're learning it takes quite a lot for some people to leave the house. For me, I grab my car keys, I get in my car and I drive. But for someone else, there's a whole world of anxiety that could be brought up for it. And it's quite a significant challenge to get out there. And that's where this kind of, it has to be worth doing is coming from it. And the preamble to that kind of getting on your website or being able to call someone up and ask for information, and it being in the right language that they can get on board with, or having an audio alternative, or just something that will, even language can be a barrier for different people. Really, really important. And I think what we've said is that we talk about accessibility, and there's three things that stand out. There's physical accessibility. So that's where you're talking about your gates and your tracks and stuff like that. Then there's also sort of a socio-cultural style accessibility, which is where religion may mean that going out into the countryside, you might feel like there's things which aren't available to you, or the environment might not be right for you. There's also race as well, where your identity, you might feel like you don't feel that you belong. And these are things I'm having to be as vague as I can, because I don't represent these characteristics. And again, that's something that humility that Helen's mentioned already is so important. And the third one is this sort of psychological, ecological relationship. And that's where accessibility is at its most rewarding. And I think it's neurodivergence was the latest session, and it's where, yes, there's things you can do to help those people come to site, but doesn't it pay off? There's people who getting in touch with nature, it can be so beneficial to their well-being, and the fact that they can't access nature means that they can't get to that thing that's going to make them feel so healthy. It's sort of like finding out you need the doctor and not being able to get to the hospital. It's really proactive well-being, and to break down that barrier is so helpful.
Yeah, and so often I think at the moment when we're hearing about nature and well-being, it's we've been hearing for a long time, nature really helps with well-being. Get out into nature. People are saying that they cannot access nature and are experiencing barriers.
And wasn't COVID the huge example of that? We suddenly saw the importance of getting outside, and we suddenly saw how actually so many people didn't have it. So many people didn't have that access, and it became really, really apparent, I think, over those couple of years. So that learning the value of nature, but the unequal access to nature, I think we were on that kind of trajectory already, but it really accelerated the awareness probably within the sector and outside our immediate sector as well, probably within health, and I'm sure loads of other cross-cutting elements of the world. But it's really, I think, given everyone an impetus to say, actually, this is important. We've seen that play out through a pandemic, and we know that we need to equalise this, and we need to make it easier for people to get those benefits.
And yes, it sounds like you're developing these processes as you're learning, and thinking about really thoughtfully how you're going to approach this work. And I know through the learning there have been some there's some quick wins as well, and I'm wondering, what are there things that you've been able to implement and change since that event in Slimbridge?
I think if you want to start at what we were able to change that was really impactful, I think there's a little bit more challenge culture. So you ask, when someone's talking about something, you just say, in whatever way you phrase it, is that accessible? And you start looking at things differently as well through that same thing of, this is the norm, but you can't just say, because that's the way it's always been. So you start challenging things a bit more and saying, what could we do here that would be more accessible? And reaching through projects, it's reaching through day-to-day life, it's reaching through, you kind of have to accept to some degree that sometimes you're not going to have someone in a wheelchair able to do certain jobs, but why don't we have anyone on our team who's able to do that? Do they want to come and work for us? Do they feel like we expect them to be there? So that whole culture has been one thing, and I say that's not a quick win, but just to change your perspective is quite quick actually, to have your eyes opened. And then in terms of your quick wins, we've had our access audits, we've been doing them for a while already, so we had a bit of an idea, we already had projects going in that direction. But we're able to get funding, we're able to use the information we're learning to say, okay, let's remove that gate, it's not necessary. Let's replace that gate because it is necessary, but it's not accessible. That track there, too steep, too boggy. We're identifying really, really almost silly steps that don't need to be there and trying to remove them.
Done a bit of shopping?
Done a little bit of shopping.
Bought some benches, bought some crockery, we're hopefully buying some chairs, so there's bits and bobs like that, a little bit of shopping, some of it's more expensive, some of it's less so. And actually, those tick lists that I talked about earlier, there's been something for me maybe about it going from a bit of just an annoying exercise to actually we sit down and we go, all right, like how many of these can we change this year? And actually being able to push back on it, and as you said, it's a cultural change, and going, okay, well, why don't we have these things yet? And actually, how much would that really cost to do? And who does this sit with? Why isn't this being done yet? And using them as a kind of empowering, let's see how many we can get done by Christmas kind of list, rather than it's weighing us down that there's so much to do. It's actually quite empowering.
And pairing that up with building it and then inviting people to come, and you do that by including them from the start and say, we're going to do something, help us do it, that co-design element, but also building that relationship up with people. So we've got sites now where we've got people who are around and can talk to visitors, and we're actually talking to people and saying, is there anything we can do to help you today? And that's a question you could ask anybody. It doesn't really matter if they're in a wheelchair or not, or if they look like they may have a guide dog with them. But it's questions that we can ask people, and it helps us get a feeling, and we're taking feedback from people, capturing that and putting that into plans for later, because again, it's perspectives we don't have that they can really contribute to. And we're talking to organisations who have developed their own experience through education rather than through lived experience, but they've gained that through talking to people who do live it. And we're now talking about, could we bring a tramper to site? Because we've met people and they said, I wish you had a tramper. And now we can begin that journey of bringing one in and really making sure that we're not just doing stuff because it's a tick box, we're doing stuff because we know people will benefit from it, and making sure that they know that they can come and benefit.
Thinking about access to nature as a program, like how is it, other than providing learning, like how has it supported you in implementing some of this thinking and the changes?
Something about being part of a bigger network, isn't there? So when we go back and talk to our colleagues, and when we're trying to escalate these ideas and escalate cultural change, there's something about it not just being me and Max, but actually we're part of a county-wide network of people within the sector, so it adds that impetus. But also there's something about it escalates the impact you have if you are all working together. So we've talked about this for a while with the concept of biodiversity and landscape scale, and you will have to work with your neighbours, and it has to work across a big patch to work, because we don't all have little isolated islands of butterflies and bees, etc. But the concept is true of access as well, I think, and if we're working with our neighbouring landowners, whoever that might be, the Wildlife Trust or the council, but also the other people who work on the land, and we're actually doing something in a joined up way, what an impact that has for people's access. Because actually rarely do they just visit one site. Our places do all join up, and it would help if we spoke a coherent language, and if we had a similar infrastructure and there was a recognisable way that people could enjoy our spaces. So I think there's something about the power of it all combined is greater than the sum of its parts. So
I read an article, I couldn't tell you what it was called, who wrote it, but it was basically a blog that said you should head to maybe Lincolnshire or something like that, and said it's like the Cotswolds but accessible. And the idea of somebody now has to, if they want to go somewhere in the Cotswolds, they have to do loads of research to find out where they want to go is accessible for them. But wouldn't it be great if instead they just went, doesn't matter, it's the Cotswolds, it's accessible. That's if you were looking for the golden future, blue sky thinking, it's nobody worries if they're going to be able to get to site. They just need to know what to expect when they get there. And I mean, you're from...
I'm laughing because I'm from Lincolnshire, and the idea that Lincolnshire's like the Cotswolds but accessible, that's an interesting PR take they've taken.
And transport, I've heard transport in Lincolnshire.
There is you can't get to Lincolnshire, but once you're there, it's flat.
It is. Yeah.
Not the version of accessibility we're looking for, but this idea that people aren't coming on holiday to the Cotswolds, or they can't live in the Cotswolds because it's not an accessible place to be, is baffling, because it is 2023. We accept that everyone's a human being now, so let's treat them like that and give them places to go.
Yeah, and that's the aspiration, right? And it can only be achieved collectively, and I think that's exactly what you're speaking.
It's not a competition.
It's being part of a network. And not duplicating efforts and sharing contacts, and as I say, putting in plans that actually are coherent. So if you're talking about things like transport networks, then they need to move around all these different sites. We don't want a minibus that just hops between National Trust locations. We want it to join up to where people live and the other places in the area they might want to go, for example. And that's just one way that working in a network is powerful. But then, as I said, it's also that idea that you've got friends, you've got peers, you've got people who are all singing from the same hymn sheet, and that helps elevate your voice.
Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group for the forum, so everyone who's a participant, it helps Barnwood remind us when we're meant to be somewhere, but also it gives us links to what people are doing. So there was the Canal Festival in Stroud that was organised with accessibility in mind, so they shared their posters with us, they shared their information with us, and people were able to go and enjoy it because they knew everything about it. And it's just that information sharing is brilliant, and it's also a little bit validating as well, because you might be doing something, not sure if it's quite right. You've taken loads of opinions, but also then you're finding out someone else is doing it too, or you have a concern and they've got that concern too, and it makes you feel less like an island, and more like you've got something that people can work together on. And then you're taking home stuff that you can share to your colleagues. You're only a sample of your organisation. You share it with your colleagues and say, "Isn't this great?" I think I shared the slides from the neurodivergence session and said, doesn't this remind you why you're doing what you're doing? And doesn't it also help you think about how you could do things differently to help these people? And really, really enriching stuff, I think.
So you've been talking about how useful sharing the learning within Access to Nature and the different organisations involved has been for you and for others. And I'm wondering, have you been able to share your learning more widely at all?
Yeah, so as well as internal sharing, which is obvious, and sharing within the forum, we're getting so much confidence in and belief in what we're doing that we feel like we can share it beyond that space and take it a little bit out of the safe space and out of our own comfort zones. And with Barnwood, we attended the Outdoor Recreation Networks conference, which was in Leeds, so well out of Gloucestershire. And there, so we as National Trust, but also kind of speaking about what Access to Nature was achieving, we spoke about the processes we were building, the learnings we've taken, and passing that on as, we've learnt this, it might help you too, but reminding people we're not experts. Meanwhile, sat next to people who probably were experts. So we've taken that there, and people were saying it was really, really useful stuff. And I was like, barely any of these were our original thoughts. These are other people's thoughts that we've learned, and we're passing them off in that way. And, you know, inspiring other, I know that we've spoken to other regions who are saying, that sounds like a good forum, I wish we had one of them too. And, you know, we can say, well, find yourself a Barnwood. Find yourself somebody local to you who can help you bring those people together. It's amazing how many people aren't working in partnership with other people. And, you know, they were at that conference, people were saying, I'm too small a charity to do these things. We're saying, well, you don't need to be big to do these things. You just need to work with people who can support you. And I think that there's a load of takeaway from that conference. And it was very nice that what we were doing was part of that takeaway. And then we also got to take some more away for ourselves. And then we were able to pass that back through our organisation and say, look, the work we're doing here is being listened to, it's being respected. People are taking ideas away from that. There were people from National Trust of Scotland, so that's in that kind of world of National Trusts. They came along and they learned from that. And it was quite nice to pass on to the people who had endorsed us attending this. So again, this doesn't happen without us getting support through our own directors, and it's top-down stuff here. They want us to attend these things. Yeah. We're getting guidance of go out and learn about this, and we're being told get into your communities and talk to people. And this is one of our ways of doing that. So we've got directors and our general managers sending us along to this to really learn. And we're able to turn around to them and say, we learned, we shared, and it's really proving that it makes a difference and it's working for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so for people who might be listening, watching, who work for organisations, nature organisations, small or big, and they might be on the start of this journey around accessibility, like what kinds of things would you say people need to think about in terms of getting buy-in and starting that process?
I suppose it can seem intimidating because sometimes it can seem like you need a lot of money to make changes and you need loads of knowledge and you need loads of detail to get it perfectly right. But I think fundamentally at the beginning of the journey you need time, so you need permission to have time to have conversations with people, time to go away and do learning, time to do networking and attend things like Access to Nature. And so you might need that permission of time from senior management, but you also need to be curious and open-minded, and you need to go in willing to have your preconceptions challenged, willing to learn, and willing to say, just really listen to people and not go in thinking that you know what the problem is that needs to be solved, but actually you're willing to just sit back and be told some stuff. So a bit of time and a bit of an open mind to start with, and then the rest will come, the knowledge will come, you'll find the funding, and you'll work out what the changes are needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. And so, in terms of the future of your work around access to nature in National Trust in Gloucestershire, what's next?
Well, we're excited to attend the rest of the programme this year, of course, and maintain that connection with the wider network. We're excited to take part in some co-design, as we've talked about, and actually really start to just understand what the need is and then actually make those changes, but also make more connections, meet more communities, and just kind of snowball this, I suppose. You know, we've started with what feels like an exciting, but it's a little room of people with a lot of energy, and actually we need to get out there now and talk to people outside our sector and actually, find out what it is that we need to do and make it happen. So hopefully more conversations to come, I think, alongside starting to actually implement these changes.
Yeah, we've changed the shape of our team in the past year. So we brought in somebody who really should be here in this program, and it's good that there'll be more access to nature to come, whatever that looks like. It could be more learning, but it could just be more collaborative working. And to bring that person in to be a part of that will really help us have impact on it. Looking forward to moving forward with our projects, using this process we're building, and sharing that with the rest of our organisation and the successes there of that program, that process we're building. Hopefully seeing it replicated elsewhere, or other people starting to make their own through the fact that knowing that you have to tailor them a bit. And hopefully continue to share that with other organisations too, so that we are all continuing to work towards this more accessible access to nature future, really.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any, where can we find out more about National Trust and
I would say just come and see us. Come to one of our sites. Yeah, come and enjoy one of our beautiful places. A lot of them are just open access countryside, the places that we look after, although we do have a few which are staffed, like at Winchester Park, for example. But then, as we said, we're part of a wider team. There's the mansion houses as well in our area. There's beautiful gardens. You could read the website, you could look at books and things, but the best way to understand what we're about is to come and enjoy one of our beautiful places if you're able, and then tell us how we could make them even better. We always love feedback.
All is. And if you're not in the area where you've got National Trust near to you, or you're not sure about the visit, we have a website, and on our website you've got access statements that will help you plan your visit a bit more.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for watching or listening to part 2 of our podcast. If you would like to find out more about access to nature and the organisations involved in the learning programme, please visit the Barnwood Trust website at barnwoodtrust.org.